Aston Martin just survived the most alarming pre-season in Formula 1, and now Honda is arriving in Australia with emergency-level engine upgrades that could completely change their season. We are talking about a car that finished testing several seconds off the pace, a power unit that had to be turned down to protect itself, and a vibration issue so serious it forced the team to stop running before real race simulations were even completed. This is not a minor adjustment. This is a high-risk technical intervention before race 1. Because if these upgrades work, Aston Martin goes from crisis mode to contender trajectory. But if they fail, the entire new Honda project could start under massive pressure. And here is the part that makes this even bigger. Australia is not just the first Grand Prix of the season. It is the first real stress test over full race distance. 300 kilometers. Maximum deployment. No hiding. So the question is simple. Did Honda just deliver the breakthrough Aston Martin desperately needed? Or are we about to witness the first warning sign of a much deeper problem? Subscribe now, because what happens in Melbourne could define everything. Everyone saw the lap times in Bahrain. Everyone saw Aston Martin near the bottom of the sheets. But almost no one understood what was really happening inside that garage. Because this was not just a slow car. It was a car protecting itself. During the final days of testing, the AMR26 was not running at full electrical deployment. It was not pushing maximum hybrid output. It was not even completing proper long runs. And that changes how you interpret every single time on the board. Here is what makes this critical. When a team reduces power to prevent damage, you are no longer testing performance. You are testing survival. Honda engineers identified abnormal vibration patterns from the V6 that were physically stressing the high-voltage battery assembly. Not software instability. Not just overheating. Mechanical energy transferring into components that are supposed to remain isolated. That is a structural integration issue. And when Alonso's telemetry showed warning signs linked to dangerous thermal escalation, the team shut the car down immediately. No risk. No hero runs. Just stop. But here is where it gets even more serious. The problem reportedly repeated across different battery units. That means it was not a defective part. It points to a systemic coupling issue between engine frequency, chassis resonance, and battery mounting geometry. And if that sounds complex, it is. Because in modern Formula 1, the power unit is not just an engine. It is a stressed member of the chassis. It is part of the structural architecture. Which means vibration does not stay in one place. It travels. Through carbon fiber. Through mounting brackets. Into the most sensitive electrical components on the car. Now add one more layer. Adrian Newey's extreme packaging concept left minimal cooling volume around the power unit. Aggressive bodywork. Tight airflow channels. Everything optimized for aerodynamic efficiency. But when cooling margins shrink, thermal loads rise faster. And when thermal loads rise while vibration is present, failure risk multiplies. This is why Honda reportedly had to reduce deployment and soften torque delivery during longer stints. Less peak output, lower stress cycles, safer operation, but slower on the straights. And that is why the speed trap numbers looked worrying. Not necessarily because the engine lacks potential, but because the engine was not allowed to show it. And this is where the narrative splits. Some believe the AMR26 is fundamentally flawed. Others believe it is simply under restricted operation. Two completely different futures. And Australia will decide which one is real. Because if Honda's reinforced mounting solutions and revised hybrid maps stabilize the system, then what we saw in Bahrain was a controlled limitation. But if the vibrations return under full race load, then this becomes more than a difficult start. It becomes a design philosophy under pressure. And that is why Block 1 is not about lap time. It is about whether Aston Martin can finally let the car run free. Because until that happens, we still have not seen the true AMR26. Now let's talk about what Australia really represents. Because this is not just the first race of the season. It is the first time Aston Martin will be forced to stop hiding behind controlled testing programs. In Bahrain, they could short shift. They could limit deployment. They could abort runs halfway through. In Melbourne, they cannot. 300 kilometers. Race starts. Safety cars. Dirty air. Full throttle exits. Maximum energy recovery under braking. The power unit will experience every vibration mode possible. And this is where Honda's so-called major upgrades become critical. From what we understand, development has focused on three urgent areas. First, reinforcing the battery support structure. Not just adding material, but redesigning how the battery interfaces with the chassis to absorb and damp harmonic frequencies. Because if you cannot eliminate vibration at the source, you isolate it. Second, revised hybrid mapping. Smoother torque curves. Less aggressive deployment spikes. More predictable energy flow between the internal combustion engine and the electric motor. This reduces stress peaks. It lowers instantaneous load on the battery cells. It sacrifices a fraction of raw punch, but it dramatically improves survivability. And third, cooling revisions. More airflow, less suffocation. The Bahrain test already showed emergency bodywork openings to release heat. Australia could push that philosophy even further. And here is the trade-off nobody wants to talk about. More cooling means more drag. More drag means less straight-line efficiency. Less efficiency means harder overtaking. So even if reliability improves, performance gains may not appear immediately on the stopwatch. But here is where the deeper strategy emerges. Honda is not trying to win Australia. They are trying to unlock stability. Because once stability is achieved, power can be reintroduced step by step. Mapping can be optimized. Deployment windows can be expanded. Development tokens can be used more aggressively later in the year. And remember this. Under the current regulation framework, manufacturers struggling early can gain additional development flexibility. That could become Aston Martin's hidden advantage. Short-term pain. Long-term opportunity. But there is still a psychological layer to this story. Fernando Alonso did not leave Bahrain smiling. He knows what reduced power feels like. He knows when a car is being protected instead of unleashed. And when a driver of his experience speaks carefully about understanding the package, it usually means one thing. The potential is there, but it is locked. Australia is the key. If Alonso completes a full race distance with consistent deployment and no sudden cutbacks, confidence returns instantly. Inside the cockpit, inside the garage, inside Sakura. But if the car starts derating again mid-race, if telemetry flashes warning signals under safety car restarts, if vibrations reappear at high fuel load, then the questions grow louder. Was the packaging too extreme? Was integration rushed? Did ambition outpace validation? And this is why Melbourne is not about podiums. It is about proof. Proof that the Honda-Aston Martin alliance can handle real-world race stress. Because until they demonstrate that, everything else is just potential on paper. But now we need to zoom out even further. Because what is happening in Australia is not just a technical fix. It is a philosophical crossroads. Adrian Newey did not design the AMR26 to be conservative. He designed it to be extreme. Ultra-tight bodywork. Aggressive airflow compression. Minimal tolerance for inefficiency. A car built around potential, not comfort. And that works beautifully when everything aligns. But when one variable destabilizes the system, the entire concept becomes fragile. That is exactly what Bahrain exposed. The engine vibrations were not just a Honda problem. They became an Aston Martin problem the moment the chassis amplified them. And this is where the real tension lives. Does Newey soften the concept to protect the engine? Or does Honda adapt aggressively to survive the concept? Because you cannot keep both untouched. Something has to give. Early indications suggest the first compromise comes from the car itself. More open cooling architecture. Less radical compression around the power unit. A slightly less aggressive rear body profile. Not a total redesign, but a shift. A signal that survival comes before perfection. And this matters long term. Because if Australia proves that the vibration issue can be controlled with reinforced mounts and revised hybrid delivery, then Newey regains freedom. He can slowly bring the car back toward its intended aerodynamic ceiling. But if the problem persists even in a more conservative configuration, then the diagnosis changes. It is no longer about fine-tuning. It becomes about architecture. And architectural corrections mid-season are brutal. They cost time. They cost resources. They cost momentum. Now think about the psychological layer inside the team. Honda is working around the clock in Sakura. Aston Martin's engineering group is re-evaluating integration models. Alonso is waiting to feel full deployment without compromise. This is not panic, but it is pressure. And pressure in Formula One reveals the truth very quickly. Australia will tell us if this partnership is resilient, or merely ambitious. Because if the reinforced battery structure absorbs vibration as intended, if ERS delivery becomes smooth and predictable, if thermal stability holds over a full race stint, then suddenly Bahrain becomes a necessary warning. A controlled early failure that prevented something worse later. But if Melbourne exposes the same weakness under real race stress, then the narrative shifts from huge boost to concept under threat. And that is why this next race weekend carries weight far beyond points. It is the first time the AMR26 will be allowed to reveal its true character. Not in a protected test session. Not in partial power mode, but under full competitive intensity. And when that moment comes, we will finally see whether Honda's major engine upgrades were a breakthrough, or simply the first step in a much longer fight? And here is where everything becomes even more strategic. Because Australia is only the visible part of the story. The real battle begins after the checkered flag. If the upgrades hold together in Melbourne, Honda unlocks something incredibly valuable. Confidence in the data. Right now, every simulation is built around restricted operation, limited deployment, conservative torque curves, artificial safety margins. But once the power unit survives a full race distance under real load, the engineers gain something more important than lap time: validation. And validation accelerates development. Because then Honda can start pushing the boundaries again, incrementally increasing deployment windows, reintroducing more aggressive energy recovery phases, allowing higher peak torque at critical exit points. Each step small, each step measured, but each step moving closer to the engine's true ceiling. And this is the part most casual viewers overlook. Performance in modern Formula One is not unlocked all at once. It is layered. Stability first, then consistency, then controlled aggression. If Australia delivers step 1, the entire trajectory of the season changes. Because the AMR26 chassis, even in reduced mode, has shown signs of balance in high-speed direction changes. That suggests aerodynamic potential is not the primary limitation. The ceiling is being held down by caution. Remove the caution, and the picture shifts. But let's explore the darker branch for a moment. Because we have to. What if Melbourne exposes a new vibration mode that the dyno testing did not replicate? What if race start clutch bite combined with full battery deployment creates a spike engineers did not simulate? What if safety car restarts push the hybrid system into repeated thermal peaks? These are not dramatic scenarios. They are realistic race variables. And if any of them trigger instability, Honda is forced back into protection mode. Which means more derating, more conservative mapping, more compromised straight-line speed. And that would be visible immediately. Not in technical briefings. On track. Cars overtaking Aston Martin down the straight. Drivers unable to defend despite good corner exit. That is when the pressure multiplies. Because Formula One is not patient. Media narratives move fast. Rivals exploit weakness instantly. And internal morale becomes fragile. So this next block of the season is about something bigger than performance. It is about momentum. If Australia stabilizes the Honda unit, the story becomes one of recovery, resilience, engineering response under pressure. If it does not, the conversation shifts toward redesign timelines and long-term compromise. And remember this. Newey already hinted that the car scene in Melbourne will not be the same car scene later in the year. That means evolution is guaranteed. The only question is whether that evolution builds on stability, or chases a moving problem. This is why the Australian Grand Prix is not simply round one. It is the diagnostic reveal. The moment where theory meets race reality. And once we see the AMR26 complete its first uninterrupted full distance, we will know which direction this season is truly heading.